When people say, yeah, it started in LA, it really didn't start in LA. Metallica was kicked out of LA because they weren't understood. You know, I'm sure that after the fact, you know, it was really convenient for people to say, oh yeah, it started in LA, but no, it started in San Francisco.
Bay Area Thrash scene, just basically because there were so many great bands coming out of here, and it was basically became labeled as thrash metal capital of the world.
There was definitely like something to be said about the new thing coming out of the Bay Area, because it was such the hot spot for thrash that you almost had to pay attention to whatever was coming out of San Francisco.
There was just like this total coming together of all these fans and bands coming out of the woodwork, and then there was the KUSF Rampage Radio, and then there was Metal Mania magazine, and this huge scene, this thrash scene, just exploded by 1983.
The Bay Area scene in 1983 was thriving. They had this show called Metal Mondays that was at the old Waldorf, and it was packed. I mean, on a Monday night.
It was amazing. I mean, there was a bunch of clubs to play at, a bunch of bands that were just breaking, and everyone would go to each other's shows, and it was a really exciting time to be around.
Ruthie's Inn started fucking having lots of shows on San Pablo there. That was the club where all Metallica guys used to go hang out.
That was like a big family there. Death Angel, Possessed, Legacy, Exodus.
Yeah, they used to have shows like Slayer, Exodus, and Possessed for $5, and it was like the most incredible scene ever.
Ruthie's always seemed to be packed, you know, and there was always a lot of bands that were playing there. A lot of underage bands would play there, you know, get paid with beer and whatnot.
We were going to Ruthie's Inn every weekend. You know, we would just drink kamikazes all night. People like Paul Bailoff would be out in the crowd bashing, you know, posers.
We came out and hung out with everybody. You would see at a Legacy show Gary and James and Kirk and Tom and everybody in the crowd.
What's funny is that after a show, everyone would just be hanging out, waiting to see where's the party going to be. And we would always wind up at the Metallica house after the shows at Ruthie's.
All the bands would go there, congregate there, and party. And Exodus lived down the street, and Blind Illusion lived down the street, Violence, all the bands lived nearby.
We just had a great scene here, and it was a total like a camaraderie and brotherhood kind of trip, you know?
The thing about the Bay Area fans, I think, was that they knew that they were in the heart of it. Because they felt and they knew that, you know, by reading heavy metal magazines and whatnot, that this was it and they were what made it.
The sound was there and the sound was understood, and it made all the difference in the world, you know, to us San Franciscans.
For me, the Bay Area scene, you have Metallica and Exodus, there, you know, a couple of other bands, and for me, I loved Exodus. I mean, Exodus was when we talk about thrash.
Exodus was so intense. The guitar work, the screaming, the yelling.
The best Bay Area bands back then was by far Exodus. There was Metallica, but Exodus to me was really the true force of what was going on.
I remember when we did the show, we did the shows with Exodus, right? You know, you hear about bands, but this was like actually experiencing Exodus. You know, it's like we got to play like these guys because they were just intense.
I want to see some fucking blood up on the stage. All right.
I still have not seen a show as intense as Exodus. And when they played, when they say there's blood up on the stage, there was blood up on the stage. I mean, to me, you know, even Metallica, I mean, in some ways were influenced by Exodus. I mean, they even got Kirk, you know.
Well, Metallica found Kirk Hammett playing in Exodus, and Kirk was a co-founder of the band.
When Kirk left the band and joined Metallica, it freed me up to, like, you know, start taking the band in the direction where we are now, you know. So it was a good move for both of us. Better for him financially.
Exodus continued without me, and I really thought that, you know, Their first album, Bonded by Blood, was just such a great, exuberant thrash metal album.
To me, Bonded by Blood was a really cool and different album at that time, and I loved riffing on it.
Exodus Bonded by Blood is the best thrash album of all time.
I put it in and it just blew me away. It was insane.
Just the raw power of Bonded by Blood by Exodus with the alternate cover of the Siamese twin getting ripped in two.
For a while, there was Exodus were banned from every Bay Area club. They could not play in any club because, you know, every owners knew and promoters knew that the place would get just destroyed. So all they could do is just play like barbecue parties. We're like, oh, Exodus is playing at this barbecue, you know, backyard barbecue, and we'll all show up and watch them play.
You couldn't invite them to parties because they would tear down something, they would rip something, they would break things. They liked breaking things and people.
The first time Slayer came up to the Bay Area, they played the Stone and Ruthie's, and after the first night, they said, go ahead, thrash the hotel. And they didn't even finish the word before we started just wrecking it. We made a new entrance into the bathroom. We tore a hole in the wall big enough to walk through, wrecked TV, spiked pizza to the ceiling, and then as soon as we got the word that the cops are on the way, we vanished like cockroaches when you hit the lights. It was killer.
They like to actually snort spit lines. That was like a big thing in their circle. So you just kind of like loogie right over there. Just, and I don't know, I guess it was a manly thing. So these guys were wild and insane and needed to be caged because when they were out, they were like just, you know, they could go into a party and then it would just, by the end of the night, we'd be the last one standing there drinking. And I remember Paul Bailoff, they had a dead mouse and he dropped it in the mouth of some girl that was passed out.
Paul Bailoff was, you know, the original singer of Exodus and definitely, you know, a larger-than-life character.
He used to do some pretty crazy things. At certain parties back in the day, he would have this thing called helicopter trout, and it was a pair of gardening shears that he had drawn teeth on, and when he saw like some poser that had like fringes on his jacket or whatever, he'd come up and cut the fucking guy's jacket up and stuff.
I think Bailoff had a lot, you know, he threw some ripping parties, and we took some people that go, you want to go to a party, man? And I'll take you to one, and you go there. You want to break somebody's house up, man, because it's okay, you know, and we'd go over there.
They look like this, actually.
Yeah.
Paul Bailoff, destroyer, lives, relationships, property. No job too big. He had that printed on a business card.
We used to call him like the John Belushi of Bay Area metal, because he was like just like, yeah, you know, it's like metal rules. If you don't like it, die.
Yeah, metal rules, and if you don't like it, die.
It's like, my grandma can make more noise than this and she's dead.
Are you a bunch of whips? Scream your fucking lungs out!
He wasn't the greatest singer, but I mean, it really didn't matter about that with him. It's just his like unconditional love for metal more than anybody I think I ever met.
Yeah! Fucking metal till you die!
Paul Bailoff would forget lyrics, he'd come in off time, but when he scream out, kill a poser, any posers at the show, they started sweating.
He was the heart, man. He was the heart of thrash. He was just, I mean, he was just a funny guy. I mean, I always had a good time with him.
Paul was metal through and through. He lived it, he loved it, he died loving it.
When Paul Bailoff left and Steve Seuss, or as we call him, Zetro, joined the band, there was plenty of reason for it. I mean, Exodus was a band that wanted to continue to work and go out and do tours, and they just weren't able to deal with Paul at the time because there's a lot of partying going on. I mean, if you knew Paul Bailoff, you knew that he liked to drink and he liked to do a few other things.
As great of a frontman as Bailoff was, they just didn't feel that he had vocally what they really needed to go to another level. So in came Zetro Sousa, who was found in Testament.
You guys are gonna be the front of Exodus style of thrash! You're gonna fucking get it! Everybody's doing the toxic waltz. Kick your friend in the head and have a ball. Come on into the toxic waltz and slam your partner against the wall. Everybody's doing the toxic waltz. Get friendly, fun, and storm for all. Get up off your ass and toxic waltz. You can hit the floor.
those were big shoes to fill. I mean, we're talking about going in a legendary band that was huge in San Francisco, and he's the new kid. But I think he did a hell of a job. I mean, Zetro, to me, if anybody was going to replace Paul Bailoff, it should have been Zetro.
One thing I'll say about Exodus, after all this time, for the last 20 plus years since their inception, throughout all the trials and tribulations, the drugs, the deaths, the member changes, the mainstay and focal point has been Gary Holt, guitar player. He's kept this band alive throughout everything. He has been not only influential as a guitar player, but the band as a whole, from Bonded by Blood on, is legendary. It's a goddamn classic.